Steve Abel.
Kia ora, Madam Speaker. I wish to speak to the Marine and Coastal Area Takata Moana Customary Marine Title Amendment Bill. Is it an accident, Madam Speaker, that the second reading of this bill was held on the celebrations of the 50th anniversary of the Waitangi Tribunal? The Committee of the Whole happened on the anniversary of the 1975 Land March, and here we are reading the third reading on the week that Jim Bolger will be laid in his grave. A gentleman called Sam Hunt, I wish to recount a brief story about Jim Bolger. A gentleman called Sam Hunt got on an Air New Zealand flight, the great New Zealand poet Sam Hunt, and he found he was sat beside Jim and Joan Bolger. They were on the way to an Anzac celebration. They talked about the futility of war together. And Hunt said to Bolger, "Do you know the poem, The Gunner's Lament?" And Jim Bolger said he did not know the poem. Sam Hunt, being a great poet, remembers other people's poems well. There's a poem by James K. Baxter. A Māori gunner lay dying on a battlefield north of Saigon, and he turned to his Pākehā cobber, "I reckon I've had it, man. If I could fly like a bird back to my old granny's whare, a truck and a winch couldn't drag me back to the army." A new cat and a coat and a well-paid job looked better than shovelling metal. And they told me that Tarauparaha would have fought in the Vietnam battle. On my last night of leave, the town swung around like a bucket full of eels. The girls liked the uniform and I liked the girls. Like a bullock to the abattoirs, in the name of liberty, they flew me with a hangover across the Tasman Sea, and what I found in Vietnam was mud and blood and fire, with the Yanks and the Reds taking turns at murdering the poor, and I could see the reason for it in the Viet Cong's blazing eyes. We fought for the crops of kumara. They are fighting for the rice. So go tell my sweetheart to find another boy, to cuddle her and marry her, and laugh when the bugles blow. And tell my youngest brother he can have my shotgun, to fire at ducks on the old lagoon but never to aim at a man. And tell my granny to wear black and carry the willow leaf, because the kid she kept from the cold has eaten the dead man's loaf. And go tell Keith Holyoake sitting in Wellington, however long he scrubs his hands, he'll never get them clean. And Sam Hunt turned to Jim and Joan Bolger, and both of them had tears streaming down their faces, because they are people of empathy, Madam Chair. And they understood the meaning of that poem and its context of our colonial history. No good, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, I apologise, can come from a bill of this character. It is a bill that explicitly leads in to those worst mindsets of colonisation. That at every turn, Māori are cut against and undermined and undone. And for all the efforts of this chamber and this House to make amends for those cruel histories of colonisations, this bill forces the Crown back into a position of dishonourability. I said in the first reading, Madam Chair, that if the patterns of colonisation are still present, then how can we say we are in a post-colonial era? And that classic pattern was confiscation followed by exploitation. Confiscation followed by exploitation. The Minister acknowledged in the Committee of the Whole that he was concerned about the impact on the fishing industry of recognising customary rights. The Minister is more concerned with giving away seabed rights to Aussie miners and bottom trawlers than with recognising the customary rights of indigenous New Zealanders. And as such, this legislation has, and I said this in the first speech, a treasonous character because its first service is not to New Zealanders. Its first service is to offshore corporate interests, in regard to seabed mining off the Taranaki coast being but one example. And it is also unconstitutional because it does not protect the tino rangatiratanga of iwi Māori to their lands, forests, fisheries and oceans. And let's be clear, Madam Chair, that customary rights, native title or Aboriginal title is a thing, as Debbie Ngarewa-Packer pointed out in their questions to the Minister today, that predates Te Tiriti. It is a thing that is recognised in other colonised lands that don't have treaties, such as Australia. And it was recognised from even the earliest days of government in this country. Even that awful legislation from 1965 acknowledges that every title to and interest in customary land shall be determined according to the ancient customs and usages of the Māori people as far as the same can be ascertained. Customary land means land which, being vested in the Crown, is held by Māoris, this is what they say, or the descendants of Māoris, under the customs and usages of the Māori people. And these provisions can be traced back to the Native Lands Act of 1965. That awful piece of legislation still acknowledged that it provided that land that is held by Māori in accordance with tikanga Māori shall have the status of Māori customary land. And the burden of proof, as the original MACA Act, should fall on those trying to prove extinguishment. This reverses the burden of proof. The practical effect of this bill shifts the burden of proof onto Māori. 106.3 states that unless there is evidence to the contrary, non-extinguishment of customary interest will be assumed. That is, the default is that Māori have customary rights. The new section now stipulates that applicants must prove that they have exclusive use and occupation over the land since the applicable period without substantial interruption. Since substantial interruption can include an extinguishment of title, the new 106.2 in effect mandates that the applicants prove that their customary interests have never been extinguished so as to amount to a substantial interruption. Therefore, the practical effect of this amendment is that non-extinguishment is no longer presumed and is something applicants must now prove. That is a fundamental injustice and undoing of even the most basic principles of common law, let alone tikanga Māori, let alone the obvious fact of history that Māori have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years and used the marine coastal environment. This is a cruel injustice, and it is founded on a tissue of myths that somehow the Minister's bill restores the intent of the original Act. I've just outlined how in Section 106 it clearly does not, because it shifts the burden of proof back onto Māori to prove the most ludicrous and obvious thing, that they have customary use of the marine and coastal environment. No good can come of it. There's no decent future for us as a country if we keep doing shitty legislation like this, Madam Speaker. It's nasty. It's the worst kind of rubbish that has come before this House. And it will be undone by a future government. And we will have to stand up and apologise, Minister, for this nasty piece of legislation, to somehow try and restore the honour of the Crown that you are disdaining. Get thee hence, Satan. This is the worst pettiness and nastiness.
Just be careful not to get personal.
A personal attack on Satan, I'm sure, is allowed.
No, I just don't want to see a particular member referred to in that way.
Let me be clear about what I'm saying with that. I say the the origin of the idea, just as when Jesus spoke to Peter and said, "Get thee hence, Satan." He wasn't accusing Peter of being Satan. He was saying the idea that he carried had its origin in the devil's mindset. Kia ora.